Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Nearshoring to Latin America, Why Costa Rica is the Premier Alternative. My name is Angie Asenato, and I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at Auxis. Just a reminder for all attendees, your microphones are muted. Should you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in a webinar panel chat area, and we will address them at the conclusion of the webinar. Now, I will continue to introduce our speakers for today's session. Liebross is the head of our BPO outsourcing services at Auxis, including finance, customer service, and business operations. He opened Auxis Delivery Center in Costa Rica back in 2010. Eric also leads our back office optimization consulting practice that includes shared services, robotic process automation, and overall back office transformation. We also have the pleasure of having Cortney Dominguez. Cortney is a seasoned finance executive with experience in leading digital transformation efforts. She has held various positions within Workforce Services over the past 14 years, and most recently, she had oversight of several teams both in U.S. and Costa Rica, which are deploying smart automation and artificial intelligence solutions for the company. We also have representation of Costa Rica's investment promotion agency, CINDE, since Ana Maria Romero is also joining us. Ana has worked at CINDE for 11 years, advising companies in multiple industries such as medical, retail, and manufacturing on their location strategy for service-type operations, and helping them set up those operations in the country from captive finance shared services to contact centers and IT. So welcome everybody again, and now I'm going to hand it over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Angie, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. In today's session, we're going to provide some insights into how companies are looking at outsourcing as a tool to not only reduce operating costs, but as a way to increase operating performance, and how the nearshore option has emerged to make this process easier to accomplish. We're going to specifically focus on Costa Rica, consider the leading nearshore destination, and provide some background on what makes this market unique for both captive and captive shared services as well as outsourcing options. And I'm excited to include my two co-panelists, Cortney and Ana. They will join us after the initial presentation and participate in a question and answer session, sharing their experiences and perspectives on establishing operations in Costa Rica and the benefits and challenges that they've seen firsthand. So let's begin with the webinar now. And I'd like to start with some statistics that highlight the role that nearshoring and outsourcing have established within business operations. And as you can see from the data here are some key points. Outsourcing has become a significant part of today's business operations, and many organizations are looking to increase their use of it. IT remains the largest user of the services, but many other business functions such as finance and accounting, customer service, and other areas are continuing to grow in use. Nearshore is increasingly becoming an option for organizations, highlighted by the fact that almost 30% of the top 25 global outsourcing destinations now reside in Latin America. This is a trend that's really emerged over the past 10 years as the development of Latin American telecommunications and power infrastructure have enabled companies to really start to look at this market for talent and cost savings, and seeing that there are fewer challenges than they may have experienced in working with an Asian model. We're going to discuss a lot of the reasons why this has occurred during the course of the webinar. But when you really want to take a look at why companies are considering nearshoring and outsourcing as well as captive shared services options, a lot of it has to do with the fact that many organizations really spend way too much of their time and focus on transactional work. As Angie mentioned at the beginning, I spend a lot of time helping companies with finance transformation related activities. And what I find is historically is that at least 70% of the company's time is being spent on transactional tasks. And I think I'm actually being kind in saying that. It's really probably closer to 80, and maybe I've seen it up to 90% of the time. So finance departments being a clear example of this, but a lot of organizations suffer from the same issues, and a lot of organizations are looking to evolve and change what they're doing, and the key drivers are some of the things that we'll talk about right now. Number one is focus. So what organizations are looking to do is to shift their focus from the transactional work that they're really spending a lot of their time on, and really starting to focus on bringing more value back to the business, getting more engaged with customers, getting more engaged with various departments, and providing more upside in terms of helping drive revenue and driving greater business insights. You really can't do this if all of your time is being spent focused on transactional tasks. So it's a key to shift your focus in the organization. The second factor then becomes efficiency. If you're going to try to shift your focus, you have to get more efficient at how you're performing the transactional work. So at the end of the day, that work isn't going to go away. So what you really need to try to do is shift the work to other resources potentially, but more importantly, just get more efficient at it, reduce the amount of time that's being spent on it, and freeing up more time to be more proactive and not as reactive as traditional organizations operate. Now, this creates a good and bad case scenario issue, which has to do with talent. So what this allows you to do from the good side is take your existing talent in your organization, the best people that you have, and shift their focus from a lot of the transactional work that they're being forced to do, and to start spending time on some of these higher value related activities. The challenge is you may find that within your organization itself, you may find people that aren't necessarily bringing the skills that you're looking for to perform this higher value work. A lot of people are very comfortable doing transactional, and then asking them to shift into more of a higher value strategic type of role often creates a problem. And as you can see from the statistic here, there's a big concern within the market about the relevance of the skill sets within organizations and their ability to make this transition. And the fact that the employment market is as tight as it is really adds to this problem. So if you take these three things, focus, the need to be more efficient, and to better use your talent, this allows you to create the organization that is really designed to take on the business needs of 2020. The ability to be more proactive, to be more analytical and predictive, the ability to provide more insights to the business rather than just historically reporting on what's going on. So that's a big reason why people are doing it. Now, when they look to make this transition, and they're looking for locations, there are various strategies that have emerged, and we've spent a lot of time over the past, 10 to 15 years helping companies identify their proper locations and some of the strategies around where they want to locate for their shared services or outsourcing operations. And I wanted to share with you some of the insights that we've seen. So as you can see, South and East Asia, the Asia market has been the most mature, longest standing operation for both shared services as well as outsourcing. Biggest driver for that is it has the lowest cost compared to the other markets under consideration. It's a large population base with a lot of talent to draw from, but it brings with it a lot of complexity. It brings with it the challenges of the time zone differences, the geographic proximity, the ability to work collaboratively gets impacted by both those factors. And often there's language and cultural barriers that come in play as well. So when you consider the various markets, Asia is the longest established one, but what's emerged over time are options to those markets. Eastern Europe has become the nearshore option for the European market. So you have countries like Poland and Romania that have emerged as destinations for European operations. And then over the past probably 10 to 15 years, Latin America has emerged as the regional solution for the Americas. And the big drivers behind that, as you look at an Americas-based population, is obviously the geographic proximity. It's a lot easier to get to than you're trying to get to Asia. The time zone, typically in Latin America, it's going to operate in various comparable time zones to the U.S. operations. You do have a lower cost. That lower cost may not be as low as what you could potentially get at Asia, but we're still seeing anywhere from 30 to 60% in labor costs compared to the U.S. And we'll spend some more time talking about what those cost drivers are and what they really look like. And then obviously other factors, things like the language skills, the ability to have a stronger cultural affinity to U.S. markets, and some other kind of underlying factors such as a lower turnover rate than you're typically seeing in Asia. This is, the result of an emerging market as opposed to a more mature market where you're seeing some of that turnover take place. So really, Latin America, which is where we're going to focus, has emerged over this past 10 to 15 years as the nearshore destination for the Americas-based options. Now, when you're talking nearshore, you're really only talking these three countries that you see here: Colombia, Mexico, and Costa Rica. Yes, there's a lot of other countries in Latin America, but a lot of them don't qualify under the banner of nearshore because they may also take a fairly long time to get to. So in my mind, if it's going to take you more than 4 or 5 hours to get to someplace, that really doesn't fall into the category of a nearshore option. So when we have worked with companies, helping them select locations and identify the markets, and we've considered all the various nearshore destinations, really these three are the ones that consistently come up. You know, there are other markets, but the ones that are considered the premier destinations are Colombia, Mexico, and Costa Rica. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each one, starting with from right to left and with Colombia. So what you find in Colombia is it's definitely a lower cost market compared to much of the rest of Latin America, and is even approaching comparable costs to what you're seeing in Asia. There's been a recent devaluation of the currency in Colombia, and that's driven comparable costs to the U.S. even significantly lower. So the cost benefit from that market has been is really becoming very dramatic at this point. That you also see very strong labor force quality. The workforce available in Costa Rica, I'm sorry, in Colombia typically is well trained, educated, and has good skills. And what you're also starting to see is an emerging shared services / business services support within the government. So this is something that now the government is starting to enable and provide resources for companies to come into that market. There are tax incentives to a certain degree. There's government support to bring resources in. So that as a result, Colombia is starting to emerge as a growing destination. There are some challenges with that market. Probably the biggest challenge that we see with Colombia is really the lack of multilingual capabilities. Very strong Spanish skills, obviously, but if you're looking for English language to support the North American operation, your options become a lot more limited when you take a look at that. I recently did an analysis for a client who was considering Colombia, and we looked at Bogota as the location, which is considered the top location for English skills within the country. So an interesting statistic: 600,000 people out of the 14 million in the city, 600,000 people, a very large base of population, actually work today in business services, whether that's in shared services, outsourcing, call center, etc. It's a broad base of people that you can draw from. The challenge is, out of that 600,000, only 10% are considered bilingual. So it really reduces the ability of your organization to capture and leverage English language skills if you're looking at Colombia. Other challenges about that market: labor flexibility. You know, it's a lot harder to get them to work more oriented towards a U.S. schedule. There's a lot more holidays in Colombia, and so to get some of that flexibility that you're looking for becomes a little bit of a limitation. The other challenge, which to me is more of a perception challenge than a reality at this stage, is the security and political stability challenges. And you know, many people still kind of believe in the narco world of Colombia, but a lot of that has stabilized. There really isn't much to be concerned of in terms of security, and the government is very stable and has really emerged as a strong supporting business. Now, as you shift to Mexico, let's take a look at that market as well, which is a large labor market compared across Latin America. It's actually the second largest labor pool across the market, with lower costs, not quite as low as Mexico, but definitely in the cost a cost range that provides significant benefits to the U.S. And you do have a lot of multinationals operating there, so you have the ability to leverage multinational experience when you're bringing it into your organization. But Mexico clearly has challenges. Number one, I would say, has to do with just the political stability of the market itself, combined with, I guess, security concerns. So, you know, many of you have probably heard about a lot of the cartel violence that happens in the market, and it does create a concern. And when you go certainly outside of Mexico City, and even sometimes within the city, there's definitely concerns about that. And from a political standpoint, you know, the current government is not considered business friendly, and is definitely going to create some potential concerns and impact if you're trying to bring business into that market. You don't get a lot of support from the government for that, whereas a country like Colombia or Costa Rica work very strongly to bring businesses in. Mexico really doesn't provide much in the way of support. And then, in terms of the labor force quality and flexibility, quality, I think is a fair statement. You won't get the level of language skills that you're potentially looking for, but it should be better than Colombia. But labor flexibility is probably even more difficult than what you're seeing in Colombia in terms of the ability of people to, work more of a U.S.-oriented schedule. So let's shift to Costa Rica and really try to understand why Costa Rica is considered the number one destination within Latin America. And it's surprising because it's a very small country. It's 4.5 million people, a tenth of the size of what Colombia is, but it's definitely considered the number one destination. It's a very mature business services sector. You have a very strong base of English language skills. So interestingly enough, Colombia and Bogota has 10 times the population in terms of business services potential employees, but only 10% of those are bilingual. So if you consider, it's basically the bilingual talent that's available in Costa Rica is equal to Colombia if you consider it in that kind, if you do that kind of math. So Costa Rica provides very strong language skills. The government has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of helping companies bring in, and they provide a number of incentives for doing that. There's tax-free incentives where you're truly working. If you're working in a free trade zone, you're really actually not paying taxes if you're in the business services sector for quite a number of years. The only countries in Latin America that provide that are Costa Rica and Uruguay. Every other one that does some incentives, there are still tax components to it. So the challenges of Costa Rica: cost. It's definitely going to be higher than Mexico and Colombia. We'll talk more about what that means. Because it's a small market and you have a high concentration of shared services in that market, you have a lot of not just wage pressure, but also stability and attrition potential concerns when you're working within the market and trying to hire people. So Costa Rica, to me, has a lot of benefits in terms of the skills and the talents that it brings, but it also has the concerns of cost and concentration. So each of these really represents different options. But again, if you're really looking for those English language skills, Costa Rica, I think, by far is the number one destination. So let's spend some time digging into that and understanding why Costa Rica is considered the number one destination. There are a couple of some key highlights, and we'll dig into this in more detail, but some of the main highlights has to do with just Costa Rica being number one in terms of English proficiency in Latin America. Its educational system is considered the tops in Latin America. It has a strong services sector that continues to grow year over year, and just location, the time zone, the geographic proximity, all of these different factors have created reasons why Costa Rica has become number one, and we'll spend some more time talking about that. Let's just start by looking at the history of it. So this business services sector in Costa Rica really is only 20 years old. It started in the late 1990s, and there was just a handful of companies operating there, and just about 1,000 people in the market. Fast forward to the current state. So at the end of 2018, over almost 66,000 people were in business services. So a tremendous evolution of talent that's grown into that market, considering the size of the market. And from a handful of companies, you now see over 170 multinationals operating in the country itself. By the way, a lot of these slides are provided by Cindy, so I want to thank Cindy for giving us the content that we're about to go through. Another interesting point is how Costa Rica has evolved from an agricultural-based economy to one that is very industry and services-based focused. So as you can see from this chart, the blue line represents the business services market, whereas the yellow line represents the agricultural market. Business services has actually surpassed and has grown significantly compared to the agriculture market as it relates to a percentage of GDP within the country. And we've talked about how it's become a home for quite a number of companies. So here's some of the list of companies that operate there. Over 170 multinationals currently have operations in Costa Rica. And if you look at this list, it's really become like a who's who of the Fortune 500. Amazon has large operations there, Walmart, Procter & Gamble, which was one of the first companies in the market back in the late 1990s, Baxter, Cargill, DHL, 3M, Citibank. I can go on and on. You can see the list here. It's really become a tremendous a location for businesses to place their operations. Why this is important is because as you go into the market and as you begin to work with companies, with people in the market, and if you establish operations there, you have the ability to hire people who come out of these type of organizations. So they are used to working with U.S. companies. They are used to working not just the things like U.S. GAAP, for example, as it relates to accounting, but just the pace of a U.S. company, the style of a U.S. company, how you communicate with a U.S. company. They're very effective in working in this type of environment, and it's because they're doing it today. Now, what's happened in Costa Rica is beyond just being an Americas-based model, you're starting to see it emerge as a global business services market. So it's not a huge footprint today, but you're starting to see Costa Rica provide services in a lot of languages, certainly English and Spanish. Portuguese is definitely one that is very strongly represented in Costa Rica, but many of the European languages, French, German, Italian, Dutch, etc., are being provided out of Costa Rica today as well. And even some of the Asia languages, for example, Mandarin is a language that you're able to find in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a great location for languages. The people there obviously have an inherent capability when it comes to language, and it's well represented in the business services market. This slide is a lot on it, so hopefully it doesn't make you dizzy. But what we're really trying to show here is that a full range of front and back office services are being provided in the market today. So as you can see from this list, pretty much the full scope of finance and accounting, the full scope of human resources, customer service, IT, many of the different front and back office functions that you're typically looking for is currently being provided in the market today. In addition, you're also getting a wide array of more complex services. So Costa Rica is not only known as a great business services market, but a great market for technology skills. And you're seeing a lot of these type of skill sets, digital technology, engineering, and design skill sets being available in the market as well. So all of these type of services are currently being provided out of Costa Rica today. But why Costa Rica? What's the reason why people are looking at it? It starts with location. So at the end of the day, it's one of the easiest places to get to within Latin America. As you can see from this list, there are quite a number of flights from various U.S. Locations that go there on a nonstop basis. For most major cities in the U.S., it's typically not going to be more than a 4 or 5 hour flight to get to the market. I'm based in Florida, so for us, it's literally a 2.5 hour flight. It's easier than getting to Orlando. So for us, it's a great location, but even if you're coming out of New York, for example, it's no more than a 5 hour flight. It's also well positioned for a number of European operations. So as you can see, there's quite a number of European flights that come into the market as well. So Costa Rica from a destination is something that's well established and easy to get to. Another main factor of why Costa Rica has become this #1 destination just has to do with the overall political stability of the market itself. So the country has been a long-standing democracy, has a very similar political system to what you see here in the United States. They abolished their army in 1948, and you really just don't see any of the type of political or criminal upheavals that you see in some of these other markets. Costa Rica is very stable, very closely aligned with the U.S. in terms of economy, in terms of culture, in terms of political dependency. So what you're seeing is a market that has just become very stable, and this has allowed the rest of the country to make investments to drive the type of things that business services needs to grow. It starts with English language skills. So basically all children coming out of school are taught English in the public schools around the country. Almost everybody coming out of school speaks of varying degrees of English, and as you can see, the result of that is a very strong English proficiency, considered number one in Latin America by the various tests that provided, and almost 80% of the services that are being provided out of Costa Rica today are being done in English, as well as some of the other languages that you see here. And from an educational perspective, because the country made the commitment to abolish its army in 1948, they invested heavily in education and in healthcare. And the result is what you see here. It's considered the number one education system in Latin America, and it's ranked near the top of the world educational systems compared to many other countries. And the programs that they've instituted, the way they've established it, are really designed to help build a population that can step into that business services market and be effective. So in Costa Rica, they have a technical high school program. It's essentially a 6-year program, similar to as if a student here in the United States went through high school and then went into community college. These technical high school programs, which as you can see from the chart, is continued to grow year over year in terms of the number of graduates that are coming out of it. The big thing about this is that they provide very specific disciplines that kids who are coming out of these programs have foundational knowledge and technical skills. In areas like accounting, in areas like IT, even in areas like contact center, there are specific disciplines that the country educational system in the country is enabling kids to come out into the workforce and really have these basic skills that they can become effective day one. What we see typically is a young workforce who comes into the market, has the ability to step in and be relatively effective from day one. And by the time you're hiring somebody who's maybe 23, 24 years old, they may have 4 or 5 years of actual business services experience, a good foundational knowledge of technical skills, and are often going to college to pursue further degrees. So what's happened is the university program that's developed in Costa Rica, again, is pushing more and more students towards some of these major disciplines. So as you can see, the growth that's exhibited over the past number of years in economic sciences, business degrees, finance and accounting degrees, etc., as well as IT, this is essentially feeding that business services market. So you have kids coming out of these high school programs with these technical degrees, stepping into business services jobs, getting foundational knowledge and experience, and then pursuing their degrees and becoming much more accomplished as they move on further along in their career. These are major factors that allow the market to be that much more effective when it comes to providing a base of a population for business services. So what does that translate to into the kind of savings you can expect from nearshoring to Costa Rica? Let's dig into that a little bit. Well, honestly, it starts with the concept of, do you want to go captive or do you want to go BPO? So if you're looking at the market and you want to make that decision, you really need to look at both sides of this coin and make a decision what makes the most sense for you. If it's a pure labor arbitrage opportunity, at the end of the day, captive is going to offer you more savings than you would find from a BPO option, because frankly, the BPO provides a margin on top of their costs, so you're paying the freight of that. However, when you're looking at it from the standpoint of total cost of ownership, the total cost of ownership may actually be lower in a BPO model. If you have to go and invest in a facility and you have to build out all your infrastructure, and by infrastructure, I don't just mean computer equipment and telecom, but even the business infrastructure, the administrative support, human resources, management across different functions. Once you build all of that out and add all of that up, your total cost of ownership may actually be higher than in a BPO model, where you can leverage the facilities and the administrative infrastructure that already exists and don't have to make those investments. So it's something to consider when you're looking at the type of savings you're looking for, and can take a look at total cost of ownership and whether that's a factor. Other considerations that you want to take into account when you're looking at this decision is how quickly you want to get ramped up. Typically BPO is going to be a lot faster ramp up time. You can probably get up and running in as little as 3 months in a BPO model, whereas if you're implementing a captive and you have to kind of build a greenfield operation, it typically could take you 9 months to a year to get up and running. We already talked about the level of investment, but the other big benefits that potentially a BPO can bring you is the ability to take advantage of their expertise in process and in technology and things like automation. They bring that into the mix. That's what they do on a day-to-day basis. And typically, if you do that, you're going to get the results guaranteed by the provider, because they have to make that bet that they can deliver the results that you're looking for. Whereas if you try to do it yourself, yeah, we've all been down this path with various IT projects. You don't always get the results that you're looking for. So, you get best of breed processes and technologies, you get scalability and flexibility. At the end of the day, it might come down to a question of risk. And again, what is that? Where does the risk lie? Well, obviously, if you're considering BPO for the first time, there's inherent risk in that because it's a different type of operating model and something that you have to get used to. And many of you have probably heard stories of where it doesn't work well, but you probably haven't heard the stories about where captives come up and get off the ground. Captive shared services get off the ground and really struggle to be operationally effective. So the risk really is on both sides. So at the end of the day, a lot of these different considerations have to be accounted for when you make your decision and to go into the market. But if you're going to go into the market, clearly understand that you do have these options. Now, when you do make this decision to move forward, also understand that there's more opportunities available than just one-to-one labor savings. So typically within the Costa Rica market, and I'll give you very specific examples of what those savings look like, but typically you're going to get savings that range anywhere from 25% to more than 50% on a one-to-one basis. But that's not going to be all the savings that you're going to get. So what you're also going to start to see is this is an opportunity for you to take a step back and restructure the organization that you're existing today as you migrated to a Costa Rica operation. So unfortunately, organizations over time evolve, and not necessarily in a good way. You may have organizations that kind of don't take on a best practices shape. You may have people doing work in the organization that probably are being overpaid for the work that they're doing, because year over year you're paying more and more for the same level of work. And we also see a typical realignment of span of control needs to be done, where you may have more management in your existing organization than you may need for the type of transactional work that you're looking at. So what we have found is when you take this as an opportunity, you can restructure the organization, and you may be able to recapture another 10 to 15%, maybe even up to 20% in cost savings over and above the labor costs that you're benefiting from. Now, in addition to that, there's productivity and efficiency gains. These are coming from things like process standardization, but also bringing in tools like process automation, tools like RPA, bringing in other tools to give you more visibility into the operations. We've historically seen another 10 to 15, maybe up to 20% of cost savings that can be derived from this type of effort. So very often when you make this transition, beyond your one-to-one labor savings of 25, 30, whatever the percentage is, you can almost guaranteed count on another 10 to 15% in additional cost savings just from the restructuring and of process and the organization itself. But let's look at what actual savings looks like. So earlier this year, Auxis produced a report that shows the actual labor savings for various markets across the United States as compared to our cost to operate with our clients. So as you can see, it ranges across various markets, but overall, what we've typically seen is on an average basis, it's about a 30% cost savings, which translates into roughly 20 to 25% per FTE. But if you start looking at certain markets like New York or San Francisco, high cost markets, these savings can be dramatically higher. So we're typically seeing in a New York market, for example, anywhere from 40 to more than 50% in cost savings, translating into anywhere from 40 to 50, even 60,000 per FTE. San Francisco, very similar. Chicago, not quite as much, but you have significant savings available there as well. So typically for transactional tasks, you're seeing savings that can range in the 40 to 50% range. And then when you build the entire model, it should be at least in that 30 to 40% range. That's what you can expect. The study that we did has a lot of great details in it, and I recommend if you'd like to download this report from our website, we'll share this this webinar document with you after the conclusion of the webinar. So if you go to this link, you'll be able to download the report and you'll get a lot more information that'll really help you kind of visualize what the potential cost savings could be. So just to kind of wrap up, I wanted to just share with you a little bit about our center in Costa Rica, just to give you a quick sense of really the type of option that could be available to you in that market. So as you can see from the pictures here, this represents kind of our center, and this is the facilities that you're seeing. That's the park that we're in. We're in a park called the America Free Trade Zone, and it's a well-established park within the market. But many shared services are in similar types of locations. They're modern. They're very well designed. They have solid infrastructure. They have generators supporting the environment. So if there's ever an outage, you can pick that up. So you basically have a very similar infrastructure across the entire Costa Rica market for shared services to draw from. The center that we established, which is back in 2010, offers a full range of services: finance and accounting, IT, customer service, human resources. It's also the location where we have our RPA Center of Excellence. We currently have more than 400 employees in the market, all of whom are multilingual: English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, even Mandarin being represented. And we operate on a 24/7 basis, providing strong visibility to and service levels that you can understand and see how we're performing. But I think a big thing about the way we operate is a lot of people, the concern that people have with outsourcing is it's this kind of black box model where you really don't know what's going on, and it kind of goes into this box and you don't really see it until the result comes out. We develop very custom, flexible models that are really designed to work with you as an extension of your team. So we find it's a much more collaborative model than many organizations experience from outsourcing. And one of the things that we focus on is driving performance beyond just that labor arbitrage that we talked about. So we bring various tools into the mix as part of our operating model. Here are some examples of some finance and accounting related tools that we bring. So as part of the model, when we're doing outsourcing, so we're going to look for how we can automate processes using RPA, bringing in tools like intelligent data capture for invoice receipt and indexing, workflow solutions, automated reconciliation solutions, and visibility through analytics through a tool like Power BI. So all of this becomes part of the model that we bring, and it's why we believe we can bring a lot more value into the mix than just straight labor arbitrage. So now what I'd like to do is kind of take a step back and bring in our co-panelists onto this and let them share some of their experiences that they've had in working with the market. So I wanted to ask them a few questions and let them provide you with their firsthand insights. I'm going to start with Cortney. So Cortney, as you may have heard earlier, was involved with World Fuel Services when they opened up their center in Costa Rica. So Cortney, if you could, can you share a little bit about the story of World Fuel Services going into the market? When did you start? How did you start? And kind of what has been some of your experience in doing so?
Sure, Eric. So fortunately, I guess I'm not quite that old to be able to talk about when we first opened the office in Costa Rica, because we were one of the very first companies, like you said, back in the mid 90s that opened an office down there. So at that point, it wasn't really a shared service center. It was more of an office, but we were definitely one of the, World Fuel was definitely one of the early adopters in the Costa Rica market. For a lot of the reasons that you already mentioned. If you talk about, low labor cost, it's safe. World Fuel Services is headquartered in Miami, so ease of travel is definitely a big factor. A lot of our employees live between Miami and Broward County, so from Fort Lauderdale and Miami, there's a lot of options to get to Costa Rica. So we've World Fuel has been down there since the 90s, but it was really, I would say, in about 2014 that I got involved from a shared service center perspective in starting to transition it from what, was really an office where we would kind of move perhaps less more manual activities, I would say, to Costa Rica, where we started to really look at it and say, let's consolidate this, let's make it a global business center, and start to transition a lot of our global activities into this shared service environment. So we started to consolidate a lot of our finance and accounting functions and from around the world, so all regions like you've already addressed, and move them into Costa Rica. And a lot of those were in your traditional finance and accounting spaces. One of the things that I had oversight for was our data management function, and we also consolidated some of those efforts in both Miami and in Costa Rica. And then now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, how big is the operation today in terms of headcount?
It's well, I mean, from beginning to end, right? We've transitioned from probably a very small office to a few hundred people, so it's grown out quite considerably.
Wow.
And we are, however, obviously you've highlighted all of the other companies that are, in Costa Rica. We're certainly one of the smaller shared service centers down there. But we have, World Fuel has continued to grow out their functions, and right now they're really focused on areas that perhaps were never traditionally focus areas for shared service centers in Costa Rica, like IT application development and robotic process automation, as you mentioned as well.
Great, thanks. So Anna, this question's for you. Based on your experience in working with companies and advising them to come into the market and setting up operations, why do you think companies select Costa Rica compared to some of the other markets in Latin America?
Okay, so thank you. Definitely, there's a combination of factors that attract companies to actually invest in Costa Rica. So definitely one of the main reasons today is talent. So talent, and you mentioned it in your presentation, definitely talent is one of the main drivers why they choose Costa Rica. And then how they're able to develop that talent. So the versatility of the talent that Costa Rica has been able to prove that these companies can actually teach and retool the talent to be able to meet their needs in terms of the evolution of the shared services industry. We also see the other factor actually impacts a lot of these organizations is the proven track record. So you mentioned in the presentation the number of companies that we have, and with the experience that these companies have already leveraged in Costa Rica and their experience in the country, that has helped many others make the decision and prove that Costa Rica has the knowledge to establish shared services organizations. So today we talk about a mature market, I would say an experienced market where you can start your operations fast. And actually, in terms of moving in maturity and bringing additional functions, it also happens very fast. So the movement and the transition of the operations happens faster than when we started in 1999.
Yeah, that's great.
Then you also mentioned, nearshore. Definitely, it's well known. The distance also makes a difference. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Cortney, speaking of talent, how would you compare the caliber of the talent you find in Florida compared to Costa Rica, for example, where World Fuel is currently based in Miami? How do you find the talent comparison between the two markets? And do you see any major differences culturally, professionally, et cetera, between them?
No, I mean, the talent is very comparable. So, we find that, like you were highlighting, a lot of the language skills, the English skills are excellent. The employees are, and I think this is probably true across the shared service centers, but they're consistently tested to make sure, that their English skills are very good. Obviously, whether you're interacting with Miami or any other office around the world, English is a common denominator. So having that skill is very important. And we find that is one of the real, skills that they bring to the table. I think that one of the words that we've consistently seen employees in Costa Rica described as is very loyal, very willing to get things done. They're very, very willing to work hard and make things happen. The talent down there, I think, was originally focused on, call services, call centers and financial operations. And now it's really shifting. And so now, it's shifting much more into, technical skills, making things more efficient and finding better ways to do things. So I think that the skill set that we've seen is very comparable.
That's great, and I would agree with that. Having been in the market for 10 years, I've seen very strong talent levels across a lot of different functions. Compare very favorably to U.S. markets. So
Yeah.
Anna, what is the country doing to really continue to improve the level of talent in the market and evolve that talent to reflect some of the changes in the business services, as you see things like digitalization of services coming more into play? What from your perspective, what has the country done to help advance that cause?
So we talked about a talent evolution, and definitely the country is investing a lot, and we have always invested a lot in education. So definitely there has been investment in trying to understand what are the needs of the companies, understand what the companies are looking for, and actually adapting those skill sets so that the companies can hire from the technical high schools and also from the universities. Definitely, we work together with the academia. So we think that we're not government, but we act as a liaison with the government so that we can talk with the private sector and also with the public sector in order to adapt the programs to what the companies are required today. Today, we have been very successful, and it's difficult specifically to work with the public sector and changing career programs in very fast. So we have been working with them, and today we have very successful stories in the technical high schools where we have developed programs specifically for the service center industry, but also at a university level. Also, we have focused in specializations and master's degrees so that they meet the requirements of the companies, for example, in project management, and in also understanding what are the new trends. So we have two areas: what is the immediate needs of the companies and trying to adapt to those needs, but also understanding what are the skills of the future and trying to also to put that in place so that we can develop those skills for the new technologies and the new areas these companies will grow into.
Yeah, I've seen some of these programs, and they really do bring a lot of talent evolution into the market. So I definitely see the benefits of that. So, kind of flipping the script on that a little bit. So we're talking about talent, but we've also talked about the fact that the market has, a lot of companies located within it, and it's a relatively small labor market. So that creates, by definition, issues related to recruiting and talent retention. So Cortney, what do you see in terms of the challenges related to that, and how did World Fuel Services try to differentiate itself from other employers in the country to attract and retain good talent?
Well, I think, you highlighted this slide from Cindy that showed how many companies are now in Costa Rica and specifically in San Jose from a staffing perspective. And that creates a lot of competition in the marketplace. So, it used that competition was not nearly as challenging as it is today. So having all of those companies down there, and quite honestly, a lot of them have to offer similar type amenities, whether that be, transportation to and from the office. Many of them offer a cafeteria or a lunchroom either in the building or close by, or some of them offer that to their employees. So, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of perks, and it makes it very competitive, especially when you look at some of these office parks where you'll have several large shared service centers all co-located in the office park. So it's very easy for employees to move from one company to another. But that's all the more reason why companies need to step up and be able to, offer, not only nice benefits and perks to their employees, but also just be able to provide them, exciting jobs, feel like they're coming into work every day and doing things and making things better and providing the right support. So I think that's one of the things that World Fuel Services has really been evolving and doing, and is really providing exciting job opportunities to the marketplace and attracting great talent.
Yeah, thanks. So Anna, what's your perspective on that? How does the country look at this issue, and what do you see it trying to do to help better manage it?
So it goes along to what we previously mentioned in terms of education. You mentioned, yes, from the three countries you presented, we're the smallest ones, definitely. So yes, the challenges are around talent and definitely how we are developing that talent. I think it's a nice problem to have, definitely, because it's everything about thinking about the future, thinking about what are the new skills, and how we can implement also a lot of digitalization in the organization. So it's rethinking us and putting a new solution for the organization. So definitely one of the key areas is understanding what the companies need, and also adapting programs and working with the public and the private sector so that we can develop more talent. So that's one of our main challenges, and that's the areas we are focused on. Definitely another challenge that we have, even though most of the organizations use English as the language they support their organizations, definitely developing more talent with the right language capabilities. That's one of the areas where we have continuously been working on. So definitely that's an area we have to continuously provide data and provide information so that we continue to skill talent in those areas. Then the other is actually developing strategies with the government so that we can build talent and alliances with universities abroad. So that is not necessarily having the talent, developing alliances with the universities in Costa Rica, but actually is bringing universities from abroad to teach also courses that we will not be able to find in Costa Rica. So those are areas where we are working on, but definitely talent will be our main focus today. And languages. Another one that is important, and you mentioned it on your presentation, is Portuguese. We have a lot of our organizations that are supporting Brazil out of Costa Rica. So definitely we do need to have more Portuguese skills. So that's an area where we also are working on and trying to provide those information trying to provide talent for our organization.
Yeah, that's clearly the language skills that are available in the market have really been dramatically increased with programs like Portuguese. I'm curious, Mandarin has become a fairly, it's not a common language in Costa Rica, but I'm seeing more and more of a footprint on that. Are you seeing that as well?
Yes, definitely Portuguese for us is, so definitely, like you mentioned, English will be the first language. Spanish is a given, we speak Spanish, but definitely Portuguese is growing more and more. So, and these are Costa Ricans that speak Portuguese. So we are seeing important trainings being handled within the organization. So these are initiatives that the companies are actually engaging with their employees. It's part of the career path that they provide to their employees in their organizations. So I do see an increase in the request and demand of Portuguese capabilities.
Great, thank you. So Cortney, you had mentioned an RPA program that was established in the Costa Rica Center. Tell me a little bit about that and really what's been the impact of RPA on your operations.
Yeah, so we have, World Services has a team of RPA developers that is located in both Miami and in Costa Rica. And I think one of the benefits of having some of that talent located in Costa Rica is one, a lot of shared services centers in Costa Rica are leveraging RPA. So finding employees with that skill set is becoming increasingly more easy. But also taking some of your skilled employees that maybe are interested in RPA and helping to leverage, both their desire to learn and also their knowledge of what they've been doing on a day-to-day basis and how they can go ahead and make that efficient and more, more automated becomes critical. So, we've had a twofold approach where we've taken both employees that have that ability and then really are more native RPA developers, and the transformation I think has been fantastic. So the financial operations teams have really been leveraging that technology and doing a lot of automation so they can eliminate a lot of the paper transactions and paper trail and things that used to be very manually intensive have now been automated. And I think that's true. I think perhaps World Services may be one of the one at the forefront of that transformation. But I think a lot of shared service centers in Costa Rica are going to continue to ramp up in that space because it really is transformational and changes the way that work is performed.
Yeah, definitely. If we've been working with it for the last 4 years, and we've seen tremendous impact in our operations as well as with external clients. Anna, what's your perspective on RPA? How widely adopted are you seeing it in the market today?
So definitely, yes, we're seeing an adoption of RPA in most of the organizations. These are very mature also organizations that we have in Costa Rica, even though we have early adopters to these new technologies. But definitely, we are seeing a transition to a more digitalized shared services organizations in Costa Rica. So, and we see important RPA deployments in the shared services organizations. Now, I think what most of these companies are doing is they're focusing more on the process. So the hype came, and a lot of companies were, okay, what were we going to do with RPA, right? How this is going to impact my organization and how I deploy this. But I think what we're seeing today is less of the hype, more of the trying to understand actually what are the processes that really I can automate and really use this technology to provide productivity, and not see it only as a cost-saving strategy, but also seeing more of what I can bring to the business using RPA, right? Also, one important thing that we have seen in most of the organizations that have implemented RPA in Costa Rica is that they have incorporated this as part of their culture strategy for their employees. So making them part of this whole transformation within the organization. So that also has benefit the whole thing and the scary part about automation and I'm going to lose my job, but making them part of that development and how this is going to make them do better things, more analytical things, and moving up in the value chain. So it's more seen as a positive thing and being part of this whole transformation of this industry. Then we're seeing less of a rush in the implementation of RPA, more of understanding, and I think more of operational excellence deployments within the organizations on how we can make the process better and having end-to-end process in order to automate what is possible to automate. And then a lot of now the conversation turns around about the retooling and the upskilling of my talent. So definitely everything is put together in what I mentioned in the culture strategy of the company, and what are these new skills, what are these new areas I need to retool my talent once I incorporate this automation. So definitely I can say has been positive for the country and also for many of the organizations here.
Right, thank you. So kind of to wrap up, Cortney, what advice would you give to companies that are looking to set up operations in Costa Rica? What were some of your key lessons learned?
So certainly CINDE is a great tool and a great organization to be able to partner with, and they were able to introduce us to a lot of other shared service centers in Costa Rica. So, you're not starting from scratch. You can have a lot of lessons learned from other companies that are already down there. So having that great partnership with CINDE has been extremely helpful. But I would caution anyone that's potentially starting operations in Costa Rica to really think about countries, languages, time zones the center is going to be supporting. I think there's a perception that everything needs to be 24/7 and 365 days a year because it's a global shared service function. But, as you look at your metrics and you look at what functions you're really supporting and what hours of the day and languages, you can start to, create a center that makes sense. I'm not sure that that's something that we did well when we first went into Costa Rica as a company, but I certainly think that as you get more mature in that space, that you can make changes and leverage what makes sense. So I would certainly say, look at that as you're going in, and as you go from that lift and shift mindset to really more of a reorganization and creating things more efficient is really how you build that center out to what makes sense for supporting the organization.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to use the last couple of minutes that we have remaining to just throw the floor open to questions from the audience, if there are any. So Angie, I'm going to turn it back to you, and if there are any questions that people have posed, I'd be happy to try to address them between myself, Cortney, and Anna.
Yes, Eric, we have some questions for the audience. One person is asking, can CINDE or Auxis help me confirm the exact savings my company could get from nearshoring to Costa Rica? I would like to understand how you could support us for this evaluation stage in which we are right now.
Well, I'll put my spin on that, and then Anna, I'll let you chime in as well. So, from our perspective, what we do is we offer an opportunity assessment where we basically look at your existing operation today, and we compare that to what an operating model would look like in Costa Rica and provide you some cost structure around that. So you get a pretty clear picture not only of what your cost savings would look like, but how the operation would kind of be structured as it moves into Costa Rica under a BPO model. So, if that's something that someone's interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I can provide more details around how that process would work. Anna, any other additional thoughts on that?
Yes, well, definitely you have all the numbers, so definitely for you it will be easier to run those numbers because you have all the operational costs. We have done some of these cost evaluations in regards to the free trade zone regime, so the tax incentives programs that we have in Costa Rica. So depending on the project, we need to understand a little bit more what is the type of project, what kind of talent they will be requiring, what kind of salaries they will be paying in Costa Rica, in order to understand if it's what kind of savings. I think Cortney said mentioned something very relevant. I think it's important not necessarily think about only cost. It's just thinking about what is the whole strategy and also what are the geographies that are going to be served out of Costa Rica. I think Costa Rica made sense from a broader scope. And also you need to evaluate what are the type of talent that you're looking for. So definitely those are things that I will be thinking also. I know cost is important, but also what are the type of services and the whole strategy behind the operation.
No, I agree, and I think it's important to really get a picture of what it would look like in the future. So, for example, when we do this assessment, we're really trying to understand what you're doing today, what's your model to serve, and then what it would look like from working out of a Costa Rica operation. So that's something we could help you get more visibility to. Angie, any other questions?
Yes, I have one more. Somebody is asking, how big does my finance and customer service organization need to be to outsource with Auxis to Costa Rica?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. It really depends, but at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with what you're trying to accomplish. So if it's a very small footprint, it's going to be very difficult for you to gain any significant savings or potentially even any significant efficiencies. So, typically what we see is a minimum footprint of maybe, 8 to 10 FTEs would be a good starting point. But obviously scaling larger, the benefits would come larger with that. But in my perspective and what I've seen, that type of size is usually the minimum starting point for any organization who wants to make this transition. But if it's smaller than that, it's probably just not worth it because you're not going to get the benefits that you potentially want to see, and it may be very challenging from the standpoint of a transition. So I would say start with a minimum footprint of what we just talked about, and then that 8 to 10, and then kind of scale from there. Any other questions?
No, that will be all for today. So with this last question, we have finalized our webinar. So please look for our follow-up email with today's presentation and recording so you can review any material you might have missed or simply to share it with your colleagues. If you're interested in exploring Auxis Costa Rica Center of Excellence and how we can help you, you can visit our website at auxis.com or feel free to contact Eric directly as he just said. So on behalf of Auxis, we want to thank you for your time, to you and to our guest speakers. We hope you enjoyed the session and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Cortney. Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate your support on this.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Take care.